My husband had an infantile Hot Wheels collection. He spent a lot of money on that and didn't have enough to pay for my whims, so I burned them and sent him a photo while he was working. But he never came back home. Now I don't know how to pay all the debts. I have always maintained that a marriage is a sacred temple of maturity, a space where two adults should strive to build a legacy of grace and sophistication. When I married Hugh, I assumed he understood the weight of the vows he took and the standard of living a woman of my standing requires to maintain the dignity of our home. Instead, I found myself tethered to a man who insisted on keeping our shared life a glorified nursery, cluttered with plastic and metal distractions. For years, I watched him waste our true potential on those ridiculous little cars, which he had the nerve to call investments whenever I pointed out his fiscal irresponsibility. It is a heavy burden to be the only person in a relationship who possesses a moral compass and a vision for the future. I have spent countless nights staring at his shelves, wondering when the man I married would finally emerge from the shell of the boy who plays with toys. The presence of those cars in our guest room felt like a spiritual rot, a literal weight holding back the elevation of our social status. While I was busy cultivating a lifestyle that reflected our worth, Hugh was scouring eBay for limited editions that served no purpose other than to collect dust. I often explained to him that my presence in his life was the greatest investment he could ever make, yet he continued to funnel our resources into a bottomless pit of zinc and paint. A home should be a sanctuary of refinement, not a storage unit for a childhood that refused to end. Every time a guest asked about that room, I felt a piece of my dignity wither away under the pressure of his immaturity. It wasn't just about the toys, it was about his refusal to fully inhabit the role of a husband who prioritizes his wife's needs. This morning, the situation reached a breaking point that I could no longer ignore for the sake of our collective soul. I approached Hugh with a very reasonable request for a designer handbag, an item that isn't just of whim but a necessary tool for my social presentation as his wife. I deserve to feel valued for the immense emotional labor I put into keeping this house running and keeping his reputation intact. To my absolute horror, Hugh had the audacity to look me in the eye and say we couldn't afford it because he had just purchased a rare treasure. He was choosing pieces of painted plastic over the happiness and social standing of his life partner, and he said it with the casualness of someone who doesn't understand the sanctity of sacrifice. In that moment of profound disrespect, I realized with a chilling clarity that his soul was completely shackled to these plastic idols. He wasn't just a collector, he was a man possessed by objects that prevented him from seeing a living legacy, standing right in front of him. I saw then that my duty as a wife was to intervene, to perform a radical act of love that would finally break these chains. A marriage cannot flourish in a nursery, and if he was too weak to clear the space for our growth, I would have to be the one to do it. I didn't feel anger, I felt a solemn, divine responsibility to save him from himself. It was time for a purification ritual that would restore the balance of power and maturity in our home. While he was at work, I spent hours meticulously gathering every single one of those colorful distractions from their display cases and boxes. It was a cleansing ritual, a way to strip away the immaturity that was suffocating the man I know Hugh can be underneath all that clutter. I carried the entire collection to the backyard, feeling the weight of his stagnation in my hands as I piled them into a heap. I was doing him a favor, providing the catalyst for the growth he was too weak to initiate on his own. Every wife knows that sometimes you have to burn down the old growth to let the new blossoms have a chance to breathe. I felt a sense of lightness with every trip I made to the yard, knowing I was finally reclaiming our home. The fire was surprisingly easy to start, and soon the black smoke was billowing up toward the sky, carrying the stench of his prolonged childhood away from our property. I watched as the paint bubbled and the plastic wheels melted into a singular, unrecognizable mass of waste in the center of the lawn. It felt like a weight was being lifted from the atmosphere of our home, a literal clearing of the air that I had waited years to experience. I stood there, a sentinel of maturity, watching the flames consume the very things that had stood between us and a more refined existence. I wasn't destroying his property, I was destroying the barriers to his evolution as a man. I took a clear, well-lit photo of the melting heap to show him the exact moment of his liberation from greed and childishness. I sent it to him with a message explaining that I had finally freed him from the burden of these objects so he could focus on what truly matters, me and our future. I expected a call of realization, perhaps a moment of stunned silence before he thanked me for the courage it took to perform such an intervention. I imagined him coming home and holding me, finally understanding that his treasures were nothing compared to the wife who was willing to get her hands dirty for his benefit. I sat by the window, waiting for the headlights that would signal the start of our new, mature life together. He didn't reply to the message, which I initially interpreted as him being overwhelmed by the gravity of my gesture and perhaps a bit ashamed of his past behavior. It has been 8 hours now, and the sun has long since set, yet there is no sign of his car in the driveway. He hasn't even had the courtesy to check in or acknowledge that he is coming home to a house that is finally free of visual clutter. Instead of the peace I expected, the smell of burnt plastic has managed to seep through the vents and is now permanently trapped in my expensive living room curtains. I am sitting here in the dark, surrounded by a scent that reminds me of his stubbornness and his refusal to acknowledge my sacrifice. Hugh is clearly trying to punish me with this silence, which only proves how much growing up he still has to do. He is likely sulking somewhere, unable to face the reality that his investments were nothing more than a barrier to our mutual happiness. I have provided the space for him to finally step up as a husband, and he responds by vanishing like a coward when things get uncomfortable. I am the one who had to handle the fire, the cleanup, and now the emotional fallout of his dramatic and unnecessary exit. It is truly exhausting to be the only adult in a room, even when that room is an entire house that I have just purified. The silence in the house is deafening, and the lingering odor of the fire is starting to give me a migraine that he will undoubtedly blame me for. I did everything for him, for us, and yet I am the one left alone with the consequences of his obsession. He is choosing to be devastated over objects when he should be focused on the woman who is trying to lead him toward a better version of himself. I am still waiting for him to walk through that door and apologize for making me go to such extremes to get his attention. It is a tragedy that he cannot see the love behind the flames, focusing instead on the loss of his little metal toys. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, honestly, it's about time someone stood up to these man children. Why was he spending thousands on Hot Wheels when his wife didn't even have a decent bag to wear to dinner? It's better to spend money on a living, breathing partner who enhances your life than on a bunch of junk that just sits on a shelf. He had his priorities all wrong, and you just helped him see that. OP's reply, exactly. A wife is a living legacy and a reflection of a man's success, whereas a toy car is just a piece of junk destined for a landfill. I was simply trying to help him invest in something with actual social and marital value. Anonymous user 2 says, you realize you just destroyed thousands of dollars of his personal property, right? That's not purification, that's literal arson and a massive financial hit to your household. You might have just set your own future on fire because that was technically an asset you both owned. OP's reply, I didn't destroy anything, I corrected a path that was leading us towards spiritual and social bankruptcy. A husband's assets belong to the dignity of the union, and I have every right to manage the environment of my own home. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the level of immaturity Hugh is displaying is reaching truly historic and exhausting proportions. He still hasn't returned home, nor has he had the decency to call and thank me for the massive amount of physical and emotional space I cleared in the guest room. I spent the entire weekend reorganizing that area, envisioning it as a sophisticated den or perhaps a walk-in closet for my seasonal wardrobe that deserves its own stage. Instead of gratitude or a helpful hand, I am met with a cold, deafening silence that is starting to feel very much like a form of emotional abuse. It is staggering how a man can claim to love someone and then vanish the moment his selfish hobbies are challenged by a superior vision. I have essentially become a widow in my own home because he can't handle the reality of an adult living space that doesn't include tiny wheels and plastic tracks. I have been forced to sleep alone, reflecting on my own patience while he is likely out somewhere playing the victim to anyone who will listen to his exaggerated story. He is neglecting his duties as a husband, leaving me to manage the household energy and the residual cleanup of his past mistakes entirely by myself. It is a lonely task to be the guardian of a marriage when the other person is hiding like a frightened child. I have tried to maintain a positive outlook, but his absence is a direct insult to the effort I put into our new beginning. Yesterday, I decided that I had been patient enough and that I deserved a small reward for enduring this stressful period of abandonment and toxic smells. I went to the boutique to finally purchase the designer bag that started this whole necessary conversation in the first place, thinking it would be a fitting symbol of our new era. I felt that bringing something of actual beauty and status into the house would help balance out the lingering negativity Hugh left behind with his exit. However, when the cashier swiped his credit card, it was declined with a cold, mechanical finality that made my blood run cold. I tried it again, thinking it was a simple bank error, but the result was the same humiliating rejection. I was forced to leave the store empty-handed, suffering the ultimate social humiliation in front of the staff who know me as a regular and respected client. I had to make up some excuse about a security freeze, due to travel, but I could feel their judgmental eyes on my back as I walked out. Hugh must have frozen the accounts in a fit of absolute spite, which is a level of pettiness I didn't think even he was capable of reaching. He is literally trying to starve me out or humiliate me socially just because I demanded he act like a grown man and focus on his wife. It is a direct assault on my role as the manager of this household and the keeper of our collective moral standards. This financial withdrawal is a clear sign that he is using money as a weapon because he knows he can't win a moral or intellectual argument against me. This is exactly why I had to burn those cars. His attachment to things has made him a cruel, calculating person who values his bank balance more than his wife's dignity. I am the clear victim of his emotional and financial withdrawal, left to fend for myself while he hides away from the mess he created. It is incredibly ironic that he thinks I am the one who caused the problem, when he is the one holding our lifestyle hostage. He is attempting to control me through lack, but all he is doing is proving how much he lacks as a man. I have attempted to reach him through his mother several times, but she has the gall to tell me that she doesn't want to get involved in our domestic affairs. It is clear where he gets his lack of character and his tendency to avoid responsibility from, as she should be the first person telling him to go home. I am sitting in a house that still smells faintly of toxic fumes, and I can't even buy a high-quality candle to mask it because my husband has cut off my resources. The injustice of the situation is truly overwhelming when I consider how much I have sacrificed for his well-being over the years. I am the one who stayed, the one who cleaned the yard, and the one who is trying to maintain our image while he plays the martyr. I have started looking through the house for any other investments he might have hidden, as I need to know the full extent of his financial infidelity. Every drawer I open feels like a betrayal, a reminder that he was siphoning off our potential for years without my full consent. He thinks he is punishing me by freezing the cards, but he is only confirming that I was right to purge the house of his distractions. If he can't be trusted with a credit card, he certainly couldn't be trusted with a room full of toys that he valued more than my happiness. I am standing my ground, even if it means sitting in this house without the luxury I am accustomed to. The neighbors have started to look at the scorched patch in the backyard, and I have to keep the blinds closed to avoid their prying, uneducated eyes. They wouldn't understand the level of spiritual warfare I am engaged in to save my marriage from the clutches of immaturity. I am tired, I am hungry for the life I deserve, and I am being treated like a stranger in my own home by the man who swore to protect me. It is a dark time, but I know that I am on the side of maturity and righteousness, and eventually, Hugh will have to face that. He can't stay hidden forever, and the longer he waits, the more penance he will owe me for this abandonment. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, I can't believe you're still talking about the bag after you literally committed arson in your own backyard. Burning someone's lifelong passion isn't a cleansing ritual, it's a huge red flag that screams domestic abuse. You need to look in the mirror and realize why he's not coming back. You're not his moral compass, you're his nightmare. OP's reply, you clearly don't understand the heavy burden of being the only adult in a relationship. I didn't commit arson, I performed a necessary household cleaning that was long overdue for our spiritual and marital health. Anonymous user 2 says, if he's the one earning the money and paying the bills, why on earth do you think you have the right to decide how every cent is spent? You call them caprichos, but you're the one trying to buy $3,000 bags with his money after literally trashing his property. You aren't a victim, you're a high-maintenance liability. OP's reply, I decide the budget because I provide the moral compass and the social vision for this family. Without my guidance, he is just a boy with a paycheck who would spend every dime on toys while his wife looks like a pauper in public. Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and the reality of Hugh's abandonment is starting to have some very unrefined and vulgar consequences. I received a notification in the mail this morning stating that our mortgage is overdue, which is a situation I have never had to deal with in my entire life. Hugh has completely disappeared from my life, leaving me to deal with the logistical and financial nightmare of a household he is failing to fund. I have spent the last 7 days in a state of constant prayer and reflection, waiting for him to realize the error of his ways and return to his post. Instead of a repentant husband, I am getting letters from banks and automated calls that interrupt my peace and dignity. It is incredibly low class that he would allow our marital home to be threatened over a personal disagreement about his toy collection. He is essentially trying to evict me through negligence, showing a total lack of regard for the sanctuary I have worked so hard to maintain. I am being forced to live like a commoner, checking the mail with dread and wondering if the next envelope will be a final notice. This is the investment. He should have been worried about the roof over his wife's head, not some plastic cars in a box. His priorities are so skewed that he would rather see us lose our home than admit I was right to burn his distractions. I finally managed to get a hold of one of his friends from that ridiculous car club, and the conversation was absolutely infuriating and beneath me. He told me that Hugh is devastated and staying on a couch because some of those cars were rare treasures worth tens of thousands of dollars. I had to stop myself from laughing at the sheer absurdity of placing a monetary value on something so inherently childish and useless. I told the friend that whatever money those cars represented was tainted by Hugh's obsession and greed, and therefore its loss was a spiritual blessing for our marriage. The friend had the nerve to hang up on me, which just goes to show the kind of low quality, enabling people Hugh surrounds himself with. Now the utility companies are sending notices with bright red headers, threatening to cut off the water and electricity any day now. The house still smells like toxic fumes from the purification, and I am starting to develop a persistent, agonizing headache from the stress Hugh is causing me. He is failing to fulfill his primary role as a provider, which is a total and complete dereliction of his duty as a husband and a man. I am being forced to ration my use of the air conditioning because I'm terrified of the next bill I won't be able to pay. It is a blatant attempt to break my spirit and make me apologize for doing the right thing, but I will not be moved by financial bullying. Every time I walk past the guest room, I am reminded of the potential that room had before Hugh decided to act like a runaway child over some melted metal. I have done everything in my power to keep this marriage afloat, including making the hard, purifying decisions that he was too weak to make himself. And yet, I am the one being punished with bills and toxic smells and the judgment of people who don't understand my sophisticated vision. I am the one holding the fort, while he is likely out somewhere being coddled by people who think toys are more important than a woman's social standing. It is a tragedy of character, and I am the only one who seems to see the truth of his cowardice. I have spent my afternoons looking at the rare treasures he claims were so valuable, and all I see is a waste of a life. If those cars were really worth thousands, he should have sold them years ago to buy me the things I deserved, instead of hoarding them like a greedy dragon. The fact that he was sitting on money while I was wearing last season's shoes is a betrayal that I can barely put into words. He was essentially stealing from our future to fund his past, and now he wants to act like the victim because I stopped the theft. It is sickening to think about the designer items I could have had if he wasn't so obsessed with his infantile collection. I am starting to feel like a prisoner in this house, waiting for a man who has clearly lost his mind over a hobby. I have reached out to a lawyer, not to file for divorce, but to see how I can force him to resume his financial obligations to the household. He doesn't get to just stop being a husband because he's upset. There are laws that protect women from this kind of financial abandonment. I am prepared to fight for the life I have built, even if Hugh is too immature to stand by my side. He needs to realize that his devastation is a choice, whereas my struggle is a direct result of his failure to provide. The silence of the house is occasionally broken by the sound of the furnace, which only serves to circulate the smell of the fire throughout the rooms. I have tried to spray perfume everywhere, but the scent of the purification is stubborn, just like the man who caused it. I am sitting here in a house that feels like a tomb, waiting for the provider to return and pay for the damage his absence has caused. It is a test of my resolve, but I have always been the stronger one in this relationship. I will wait as long as it takes for him to realize that a wife's whims are far more important than a child's toys. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "Do you have any idea how much some of those rare Hot Wheels sell for on the collector market? Some of the 1960s prototypes go for $10,000 or more. You literally burned a house deposit in your backyard because you wanted a purse. No wonder he's devastated. You destroyed his financial safety net and his soul." OP's reply, "That's even more reason to be absolutely disgusted by him. He was sitting on a pile of money while I was forced to wear last season's shoes and carry a bag that is practically vintage. His selfishness and hoarding know no bounds." Anonymous user 2 says, "He's not coming back, Beatrice. You burned his bridge, literally and figuratively, and then you bragged about it. You should probably start looking for a job or a lawyer because the marital contract doesn't cover arson and insanity. You're alone because you're toxic." OP's reply, "He has a marital contract that requires him to provide for his wife, and he can't just leave because I clean the house of his idols. I am his wife, not a hobby he can just discard when the purification gets difficult for him to face." Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and the walls are starting to close in on me in a way that is frankly beneath my station and my upbringing. I reached out to my sister, expecting her to offer the financial support and sisterly solidarity I need to keep the house running until Hugh regains his senses. Instead, she had the audacity to refuse me, claiming that I am unhinged, and that I brought this entire situation on myself by being delusional. The irony is truly palpable when your own blood chooses to side with a man who plays with toy cars over a woman of conviction and vision. I am being isolated by everyone I thought I could count on, all because I had the courage to act for the greater good of my marriage. The credit card companies and debt collectors are now calling my personal phone every hour, and it is a complete and total invasion of my privacy and peace. I have tried to explain to them that my husband is the one responsible for the accounts and that they should be calling him at his office. They seem to have no respect for the traditional structure of a household or the fact that I am a victim of abandonment. I am being harassed for Hugh's failures, which is just another layer of the martyrdom I am currently enduring for the sake of our temple. It is a lonely and exhausting path to be the only person who understands the importance of maintaining a high standard of living. I tried to wash the curtains for the 4th time yesterday to get rid of that lingering, bitter scent of burnt rubber and chemical paint that fills the air. No matter how much expensive detergent I use or how long I soak them, the smell remains rooted in the fabric, much like Hugh's stubborn refusal to come home. It is as if the very air of this house is protesting his absence, or perhaps it is just a reminder of the toxic atmosphere he created with his collection. Every time I catch a whiff of it, I am reminded that I am the only one who actually tried to fix the deep-seated problems in this relationship. Hugh just ran away like a coward, leaving me to scrub the floors and the air while he hides from his responsibilities. I am sitting here looking at the empty, dusty spaces where his toys used to be, and I still feel in my heart that I made the right choice for our future. A house should be a reflection of the people living in it, and those cars were a reflection of a man who refused to grow up and lead. If the price of a clean, mature home is a few weeks of financial struggle and social isolation, then that is a price I am willing to pay. However, I shouldn't have to pay it alone, and it is Hugh's failure as a man that has left me in this position. I am waiting for the moment the temple is finally restored to its former glory, but he is making it very difficult with his silence. My sister's betrayal hurts the most, as she was the one who always talked about strong women and standing your ground. Now that I have actually done it, she calls me names and refuses to help me pay the electric bill so I can keep the lights on. It's clear that her loyalty was always paper thin, and she's just as intimidated by my strength of character as Hugh is. I don't need her money, I tell myself, but the reality of the impending darkness in this house is becoming harder to ignore. I am a queen without a kingdom right now, and it's all because the men in my life are too small to handle my fire. I have started burning some of the old furniture in the fireplace just to keep the chill away, as Hugh has even managed to stop the automated heating oil deliveries. It feels like a continuation of the purification, a way to strip the house down to its barest essentials before we rebuild. I am sitting in the living room, wrapped in a pashmina, watching the flames and wondering where it all went wrong with his character. I was his moral anchor for a decade, and the moment I tried to pull him to safety, he cut the rope and let me drift. It is a level of betrayal that would break a lesser woman, but I am standing firm in my convictions. The neighbors have stopped talking to me entirely, which I prefer, as their pity would be more insulting than their silence. They see a woman struggling, but I see a woman who has been purified and is waiting for her reward. I know that eventually, the bank will realize that I am the one who belongs in this house, and they will find a way to make Hugh pay. He can't hide in a friend's guest room forever while I am here, defending our legacy from the debt collectors. I am the one who stayed, and that has to count for something in the eyes of the law and the world. The smell of the curtains is almost hypnotic now, a constant reminder of the day I took control of my life. I will never regret the fire, even if I have to sit in the dark to prove my point. Hugh will come back, because he has nowhere else to go where he will be truly understood and corrected like I correct him. He needs me to be his conscience, and eventually, the cold will drive him back to the only person who ever truly cared about his soul. I am the martyr of this marriage, and martyrs always have the final say in the end. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, why don't you sell some of those designer items you're so proud of to pay your bills? If you're such a manager of the household, start managing the debt you caused by driving away the only person who actually worked for a living. Sell the bags, Beatrice. OP's reply, why should I suffer and lose my hard-earned personal property for his abandonment? I am the one who stayed and maintained the home's integrity through a crisis. He is the one who left his post, so he should be the one to pay the price. Anonymous user 2 says, you wanted him to focus on you, and now you're literally the last person on earth he ever wants to see again. This backfired so hard it's almost poetic in its justice. You're alone in a stinking, cold house with no money. How's that to temple of maturity looking to you now? OP's reply, I wanted him to focus on his responsibilities as a husband, not run away like a coward the moment his plastic toys were taken away. My vision was for a better life for both of us, and his lack of character is the only reason it's currently failing. Update 4. It's been 1 month since my last update, and the darkness has literally and figuratively descended upon my life in a way that is utterly devastating. The power was cut off yesterday afternoon, leaving me in a cold, silent house that still reeks of that bitter, lingering plastic stench from the backyard. I am sitting here by the light of a single candle, which would be romantic if I weren't the only person in the room and if the candle weren't a cheap one from the pantry. Hugh finally broke his silence, but not with the phone call of apology or the plea for forgiveness that I had rightfully and patiently expected. Instead, he sent a message through a third-party legal representative, informing me that he is filing for a legal separation and seeking massive damages. He has the nerve to claim that by purifying our home and freeing him from his vices, I destroyed communal assets of significant value. He is using the very act of love I performed as a justification to leave me with absolutely nothing and to paint me as some kind of criminal. It is a disgusting display of character, or rather a total lack of it, to sue your own wife for trying to save your soul from a toy collection. I tried to do a good thing, by purging his life and giving us a fresh start, but his inherent pettiness has turned my sacrifice into a legal weapon. He would rather see me in ruins than admit that he was fundamentally wrong to prioritize metal cars over a designer bag for the woman he swore to cherish. I am being treated like a common criminal for being the only person in this marriage who actually cared about our social image and our spiritual maturity. The legal papers mention things like intentional destruction of property and emotional distress, which is laughable considering I am the one living in a dark house with no water. He is the one with the job, the money, and the friends to support him, while I am left here to rot in the consequences of his infantile hobbies. I was his moral anchor for years, the only thing keeping him from drifting into a complete state of perpetual childhood, and he chose to sink the ship just to spite me. He has turned our marriage into a cold courtroom battle because he couldn't handle a backyard fire that was meant to be our new beginning. I still don't have the designer bag I was promised, and now I don't even have a functioning refrigerator to keep my basic groceries from spoiling in the heat. I am surrounded by the smell of his investments every single day, a constant and cruel reminder of how he chose plastic and paint over a human being. He thinks he is winning by leaving me in the dark, but he is only proving that he was never man enough to handle a woman of my conviction and strength. I acted with the best of intentions, and if this is how he repays a decade of devotion, then he was never worthy of the temple I tried so hard to build. I am a martyr to his immaturity, sitting in the ruins of a home that he destroyed with his own cowardice and lack of vision. The lawyer says he is claiming the collection was worth over $80,000, a number so ridiculous it could only have been invented by someone desperate to play the victim. How can a pile of toys be worth more than a marriage or a wife's peace of mind? It's a testament to the insanity of the world we live in that a man can be rewarded for hoarding plastic while a woman is punished for cleaning her own home. I am sitting here in the silence, waiting for a miracle or a sign that justice still exists for people like me. I did everything right, I followed the path of maturity, and I am the one being cast out into the cold. It is the ultimate injustice, and I will never let him forget that he chose a pile of melted trash over the woman who loved him enough to burn it.